Amazing episode. This is actually such a great episode for a pilot. I'll honestly give it a rating of 8.5 out of 10 because this is a seriously great episode.
I've changed my mind.
I'm sorry. As you can see, the thumbnail was already done. I had decided on 8.5, but after going through all of this again, it's a 9. I just have to add it and change it. It's a 9. It's a very good episode. It has the difficulty of setting the tone for the rest of the season, setting the pace for the show as a whole, introducing new characters to us and building the world. Of course, world building, what is House of the Dragon, what's going on. And we get everything in this one episode. It hints at that beautifully. It's just such a well-written episode and there's a lot to digest, but I've narrowed it down to these 5 major points for me that I'd like to talk about. Firstly, the story of the King Viserys, how he came into his rule, basically. Secondly is the thing of succession, the importance of having a male heir. This is the main problem. This is what actually the Dance of the Dragon is about. Why does he not have a male heir? Why is it important? Let's talk about it. Third, it's a woman's place in the world, and I think this was so beautifully written. It was actually so heartbreaking to see, and I'm pretty sure many women can attest to this. For me, this was the best thing about this episode. It's how they positioned the woman and they told us the story about actually a princess, a queen, just the role of a woman, right? Then I want to speak about Daemon. Of course, chaotic, unpredictable. You can't confirm him. Yeah, you just can't put any guarantees on him whatsoever, and looks like he might be envious of his own brother, the king. And lastly, I will touch on the relationship between Alicent and her best friend Rhaenyra, who is actually the king's daughter. So it's actually very big to me. I think it's also very important, and it's something that I want to highlight from this first episode. Right, let's get into it. I promise you that I'd actually really love to go into every detail about the story, go deep into it, but unfortunately that's not feasible at this point in time. I can't, make the videos too long, and I just don't necessarily have the capacity to do so. So forgive me for that, but I'll speak about things that really stand out to me. And I will try not to give any spoilers. As you would know, Game of Thrones is fully written. This is the prequel, and obviously we know how the story will end if you tapped into the Game of Thrones community like I am, or if you've read the books. But I will not give a spoiler. I will really try my best not to do that, and I will try take it episode by episode. We're reviewing this show episode by episode as a standalone. We're not comparing it really to Game of Thrones. I think it will take away from the enjoyment as the show. Yes, we can draw some comparisons, some similarities, things that add to it, but we're not necessarily criticizing it on the same level as Game of Thrones, or looking for inconsistencies between the story, the show, and the books themselves. We're not going to do that. So we're just going to try and enjoy the show as a standalone, as its own story. So let's get into it. Firstly, the king, Viserys. Who is he? His story of coming into rule is actually very fortunate. Long ago in the world of Westeros, there's obviously a king that's ruling. That's where we start. And the ruler goes by the name of King Jaehaerys. Jaehaerys, unfortunately, has no living children. As you would know, your normal living child would succeed you. And in those days, in the days of patriarchy, as they would say, that was a male heir. Your male son would become king after you. And unfortunately for King Jaehaerys, all of his children have passed on. He has no living child whatsoever. So it actually goes down to his grandchildren. One is King Viserys as we know him now, and it actually went down as well to his oldest grandchild, Rhaenys. So between Viserys and Rhaenys, they had to choose who would succeed the king. And unfortunately, they chose Viserys. The Great Council deemed Viserys, or he was voted as the chosen heir, simply because he's a man. That's the story setting. 9 years later, then we get the events of what's happening now within Westeros during Viserys' rule. So his rule, firstly, is going to be very difficult because, as we know, King Jaehaerys' rule was full of peace. I think it was 62 years of peace or something like that. No problems whatsoever. Unfortunately, that's, I don't think that's going to happen again. So, of course, it might be a little bit more challenging this time. Another thing that they hinted at is that he could be ill. Why? Because they saw him getting treatment for, I don't know if it's a sore, or I don't know what you would call it, coming out of his back, and they even said they had to cauterize it. So little things like that shows me how well a show is written, because even when they're saying that you can choose between a method and cauterization will be the best one, but it will be painful just because he's a king and he's associated to be, he needs to show strength and power. He can't be seen to have any weakness whatsoever. He's like, it's fine, just do it, because, he has to be strong and take it. Moreover, you hear Sir Otto Hightower, who's the hand of the king, the deputy, if you will, the deputy, the right-hand man, his right-hand man specifically say that this does not go out. So it means that no one should know this is happening with the king, because it's not a good look to have any rumors of the king being ill or sick or weak in any way. Yes, that's in literal summary of basically the introduction that we got to Viserys, the king. We also know he has a daughter. This leads me directly to my next point, the importance of an heir. A male heir. I mean, an heir is male, but you know what I mean. He has a daughter. His daughter's name is Rhaenyra, but the issue is, in terms of succession, they would ideally prefer him to produce a male son so he can inherit the throne. And based on what we've talked about, you understand the issues or the great lengths that it took to appoint him, simply because the previous king did not have any surviving children. And it was chosen that even the eldest grandchild couldn't become king because she was a woman. So we know how important it is to have an heir, and he does not have one at the moment. However, he is expecting, his wife is pregnant, and he's very obsessed with the fact that, yes, this time he can feel it with no sense or anything behind it. He just knows that it's an heir. He just has I think to me, it's the illusion or the pressure or the delusion rather, that, he just wants it to be. It's more hope than anything, because you can't really prove that it's going to be an heir. He says he has dreams, he has visions, he has whatever, but that doesn't necessarily confirm it will be a boy, it will be a son. But all of a sudden he thinks that it is, and it's, it's all going great in the story. And I don't know, the wife doesn't seem to be that enthusiastic about it. This leads me directly to my next point, the role of a woman. A woman's place in Westeros, a woman's place in that time. For me, this makes the episode. Already, she has a conversation with her own daughter, Princess Rhaenyra, and of course, this is Queen Aemma. Queen Aemma is basically saying to her that we exist as women to serve the king. Well, as a queen, your job is to serve the king in all ways possible, and is also to serve the realm and the kingdom. And that is literally by producing a son. Not children, a son, at least a son. And this conversation was so painful to hear, because you can hear the pain in her voice. And this conversation with her husband, the king, sets it up, right? She details the struggles that she's had to go through just to try and produce a son. She even says, I'm so sorry, my love, if I've failed you in that regard, because that's a queen's number one job, to produce an heir, and she hasn't. And it's so painful, because she says that she's lost 5 kids in trying, and she's now tired. And this is the last time. She does not want to try anymore. If this is not a son, she cannot bear it. She's had 2 miscarriages, she's lost 1 child, and she's also had 2 stillbirths. That is incredibly painful. You cannot imagine the struggle that a woman will have to go through for that. So she is saying she is done. Whatever happens now, she is not interested in trying anymore. My queen has lost 5 kids. That is incredibly crazy. That's insane. And she's tired, and you can at least understand where she's coming from. That's for sure. And just for House of the Dragon to show you that this is a product of Game of Thrones, and the slogan for Game of Thrones is that there is no happy ending.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.
The episode leads you into believing that it will be done. They host a huge tournament in celebrating the upcoming new heir. The king is going to have a son. She's late. She's going to give birth soon. It's coming. And everything looks to be going well. It's a celebration. But then Game of Thrones shows you that there is no happy ending in this. Even when you started believing, it becomes even more tragic. Now it gets to a point where there's a problem, a complication during birth, and the king has to choose whether the doctors try to save his queen, his wife, or the son that he needs so badly. Oh my God. Now, this is actually a proper conversation. It's a real life conversation of who comes first, right? Your spouse or your kids? That's always been an interesting conversation to hear what, the public opinion is. But you can understand how they've built up this pressure of why the king needs a son so badly. Never mind the fact that it will destabilize the realm if he doesn't have a kid. If he doesn't have a kid, it will a son. It will destabilize the realm because the realm will not accept, apparently, his daughter to be queen. It's just not how it works. It's patriarchy. It's unfair, but that's just how it is. It will cause a problem. There are other people who will come and lay claim to that throne. For example, his brother. We'll get into him just now. So it's very important for him to have a son. So this is not an easy decision to make, but she's your wife. She's still the love of your life. She's given you, a whole lifetime, and she's also given you a daughter that you love so badly. But now I guess your point where you have to choose between both. And unfortunately, just for Game of Thrones to show you that it's so bad, both of them die. Both of them die, even after he chooses the kid. He chooses that they try save the child. He sacrifices his love, his wife, but it still doesn't work out. They both die. It's horrific how they showed it to us, and it makes it a brilliant episode for the way they portrayed it, the detail that they went into it. It was extremely graphic. It was painful, and it was not good to look at. But the way they went about it, absolutely amazing from the show. House of the Dragon episode 1 is a beauty. The thing is, she could have died anyway. The baby was in breach. They couldn't turn the baby, and unfortunately they lieu of a last-ditch method where they actually cut through her womb to try save the baby, but that directly kills her. And the crazy thing is, she wasn't live when they were making the incisions. I mean, it was so brutal. The blood was coming out. It was so painful just to see her go through it. And Viserys basically said, "I love you." And he knew that he had made, a sacrifice. He had made a decision. He had chosen the baby. And unfortunately, to make even things worse, they got the baby out. The baby was alive apparently for a few hours. And then the baby died. It was so crazy. And it's so funny because Rhaenyra was there telling her mom that can't be that all there is to life. You just basically existing with no hopes and dreams, and everything that you have is actually based on the king. That's not the life that she wants. And she was just worried for her mom's health. All this time she's been saying, "Mom, are you okay? I'm worried about you." She was telling her friend that she's actually just worried about the pregnancy and the toll it's taking on her mom, and it actually doesn't work out. And to be fair with you, it's absolutely very heartbreaking because she knows she doesn't want that life, but someone who really wants that life, and it treated her so badly, it didn't end well for her at all. That is heartbreaking. Now we're on to Daemon, and obviously the question is he the jealous brother? It opens up his first scene. He's sitting on the throne. He's sitting on the king's throne, his own brother's throne. Is that trying to hint at something? Maybe it is trying to hint at the fact that he is envious of his brother. He's accused of not being emotional enough at the funeral. Why? Because he knows that if his brother does not have an heir, he thinks he will inherit the throne. Why? Because remember, although his brother has a daughter, it's a patriarchy. They do not usually put women in that seat. So he thinks that this seat will now come to him, this responsibility. He's the next in the succession line, so he will become next king. He'll become the next king. On the night of the funeral, Daemon apparently bought out a pleasure house, and obviously he's the king of the streets. The streets love him so much, and they actually think of him as king. So they were actually celebrating the fact that the king didn't have a son, and basically that the son passed away, because it means that Daemon will still be in line to be heir to the throne, and he'll take care of them. And obviously, the king found out. It led to this confrontation between them. And basically, he then tells him to his face that he needs to protect him. His council doesn't protect him. He thinks his brother is weak. He thinks the king is weak. And, he should have made him hand of the king. Viserys then says, "You're not worthy to fit the crown." He doesn't see him as a proper king. And he's also not best suited at the role of hand of the king. And that's why they actually tried other positions like Master of Laws, Master of Coin, but he also didn't handle that job well. But at least he tried with City Watch, with Commander of the City Watch. He's also been very brutal with how he handles that job, because he basically just dismembers body parts and collects them. But he ends up being basically chased away, because there's also a notion that there's a possibility that if he is jealous enough, he could kill the king himself just to take the throne, right? And just for the king's safety, and the best strategy right now is to send him to his actual wife. He's been busy with mistresses. He has a huge mistress here, and he treats his wife very badly. He hasn't seen his wife in a long time. He has a mistress here. Of course, he refers to his wife being less beautiful than sheep. And he even offers to give her away to Sir Otto Hightower. Like, he doesn't care about his wife at all. And they're basically saying, no, it's time to go do right by her, go do your duty as a husband. And he's chased away. But Daemon did have the streets, so that's also a threat, because as commander of the City Watch, he technically had an army of like 2,000 people that really respected him and listened to him and went about his orders in a very efficient way. For example, they were saying they were cleaning up the city. They'd round off the thieves and cut their hands off, round up the rapists, cut their dicks off, round up the murderers, and he put them to the sword himself. So he was just going about his business very swiftly, no negotiation, and he just, like I said, he was just collecting body parts. He was definitely becoming a problem, and they were even discussing it at the council meeting, that, you know, they don't really trust him. They think he doesn't make good decisions, and he's not fit to wear the crown. So, well, he's not fit for council, period. But I loved how he was fighting with Otto Hightower. They have a beef, and clearly this guy is envious of the fact that he's Sir Otto Hightower's Hand of the King, simply because he wants to position himself, and he thinks that Otto Hightower is playing Viserys just to further his own agendas. And you can tell that, you know, he tries to get at him, talks about his wife who recently passed away and how he hasn't gotten another woman. He basically at the tournament challenges Sir Otto Hightower's oldest son and then beats him, knocks him to the ground, and then even to rub salt in the wound, asks for Sir Otto Hightower's daughter Alicent's favor. And he believes that it's Sir Otto Hightower's advices to the king that keeps pushing him away further and further from his own brother, and he doesn't like that. Lastly, it's the relationship between Alicent and Rhaenyra. These are best friends, and obviously Alicent is the daughter of Sir Otto Hightower, who's the Hand of the King. Rhaenyra is the daughter of the king. They look to be in good spirits, but it's very important to note that they are totally different people. Different women with different ambitions. Alicent is basically like Rhaenyra's mother. She loves the traditional role. She wants to become queen one day. She studies. You can see they're studying. She's taking it seriously. Rhaenyra is joking about it, but she's very smart, Rhaenyra. So she says she already knows. She's just not interested. But it's very clear that, like Arya from Game of Thrones, for example, one wants something what the other one doesn't really. She doesn't believe in a role of a woman like that. She wants to ride a dragon, ride into combat, go to war. That's Rhaenyra. While Alicent is very, very, I don't know, I think ladylike. You can even see in her mannerisms that Rhaenyra swears, and she keeps on, you know, she laughs at it because she can't imagine doing that herself. At the tournament, she's disgusted by the blood. She gets scared when people are killed at the war that breaks out, and Rhaenyra's she doesn't flinch, right? So you can tell that these are two different types of women. Very interesting dynamic. And at the end, Sir Otto Hightower might be playing chess, not checkers, because he literally sends her to go comfort the king, and she plays the role as she's been instructed, like basically as a woman in that time would do as she's told by her father, and also to impress the king. So she goes and comforts the king, and I think that's also part of Sir Otto Hightower's plan to get the king to make a son. And he's even sending and pimping out his own daughter. That's insane. And this is probably what Daemon was referring to as he's trying to push his own agenda. And if his daughter can become the queen, then his house wins. And lastly, Viserys naming his daughter Heir is a very good and strategic move, because then it removes that question of who will be next on the throne. And he's specifically now saying that it will be my daughter, it will be Rhaenyra, and plus he's basically almost banished Daemon. So, you know, that's obviously going to be a problem, but it forces the houses to declare for her. So to basically say that we accept this as our next our next queen. He also then shares the secret that is being passed on or was being passed on from king by king. It's a very well guarded secret. Basically, there's a winter that's coming and there's going to be a big war that comes, and at the time that this comes, there has to be a Targaryen on the throne, on the Iron Throne, on the seat. It has to be a Targaryen because only they can unite all the world to go up against whatever is coming. And we now know that that's the White Walkers from the series Game of Thrones, which happens after the events of House of the Dragon. So here, I do not believe this show will have White Walkers. I think this is just about the Targaryen family. That's it. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the first episode like I did. I still think it's a solid 9 out of 10. I'm very, very pleased. I think it's gonna be one of the best episodes of the season as a whole. So yeah, that's my rating. I hope you enjoyed it. Please stay around, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.